My name's George, and I'm on my way, I hope, to playing volleyball full-time as a professional. I'm currently in my second season in Uppsala in Sweden. If you want a bit more context about me and what I'm doing, then check out my previous video where I talk about this in more detail. But in this video and the upcoming ones, I'll be covering my time from when I first got to Uppsala through till now. If you want to know what I'm up to in real time, then Instagram is the place to be. But otherwise, we'll start the journey back in pre-season in May 2022 when I first had a trial with Uppsala, accepted it, and then went back to England ready to have pre-season. The plan was to arrive in early August for actual pre-season training. Unfortunately, things didn't go according to said plan. However, I wasn't to know this at the time, so I had a lovely few months of a pre-season planned in Norwich in England. So my main focus for this pre-season period was in the gym. So I still am, but I've always been quite skinny. And my coach in Uppsala told me basically, the big thing you need to work on is jump higher and hit harder. And you're going to do that by lifting some weights or more weights and eating more food. Because I think the big problem for me is I had been pretty consistently gymming whilst I was a student, but I'd probably been quite badly under eating, not taking my nutrition seriously enough. So this was a big thing to fix, and hopefully I could see some good gains. So he gave me a program, and I followed it pretty religiously, and that was one thing sorted. My plan didn't involve a huge amount of volleyball, largely because there wasn't a huge amount to be played. I had a couple of mixed tournaments, which were good fun, and trained once a week with the local National League team. The other thing then, apart from generally chilling out and having a nice time with friends and family, was I played a lot of other sports. So for me, it was mainly tennis, table tennis, and golf. And I think, mainly obviously I did these because I enjoy them and they're fun, but there is a lot to be said, and I've made a post about this on Instagram, and I plan to make a video about this too on this channel, is there's a lot of utility for whatever your main sport is in playing different sports. Like the transferable skills, I think, bigger, especially the mental ones, than people realize. A quick example being, let's say you're trying to work on hitting your clubs further, maybe particularly your driver, and you're trying to think about generating power using your hips, getting your hips through the ball in that big turn and weight transfer. That's very similar, I think, to adding power to, say, a spike or a serve in volleyball, about using your hips and your shoulder in this big turn to generate more power. That's not to say the number one priority, if you're trying to add power to your jump serve in volleyball, is to start playing golf and go down the driving range, but I do think these things help maybe more than people realize, and it's a nice bonus when you're then enjoying playing these sports. As I said earlier in the video, things did not go according to plan. The general issue here all relates to visas. So I said in my previous video that I don't have a salary here in Uppsala, which means to be in Sweden for more than 3 months at a time, because post-Brexit, as Brits, we can only be in Europe for 3 months out of every 6, and the season is longer than 3 months. I need a job. So I got a job, that all went fine. It's in an international school here in Uppsala. That wasn't an issue. They said they'd sort all the visa paperwork for me and all this stuff, just had to keep up to date with the emails. That's, in theory, all fine. Should take 4 to 6 weeks. The school handled everything fine, it's no fault on their end, but instead of it taking the 4 to 6 weeks, meaning I'd arrive in Uppsala in time for pre-season at the start of August, I say instead of 4 weeks, it took 4 months. So I didn't get to Uppsala until October. So I missed all of pre-season training, the first game of the season, all the pre-season friendlies. I missed any training I might have had at work. So that generally was not ideal. Logistically, there was nothing we could do. We just had to wait, twiddle our thumbs and hope to get an email through. In fact, we were told if we were to inquire about how long it's going to be and ask for an update, that would actually slow the process down. Again, I said in my previous video that one of the things that's important to me with these videos is I want to be open and transparent about what this is like trying to play volleyball or sport generally professionally as a Brit playing abroad. I have no interest in trying to paint an idyllic picture of this amazing life of playing a pro athlete or anything like that. I very much want to show the good things, but also the bad things. And this is as good a place to start as any. So I found this process of waiting for my visa, being in limbo as we came to refer to it, honestly quite depressing. I'm not to say I was depressed, but it was much, much, much harder than I really thought it would be. This was for a number of reasons. So the first big one was this, again, feeling of being in limbo, not knowing if you're coming or going. And it's like a culmination of loads and loads of little things, I think. It's quite hard to put into words really what this is like. The consequence of this, I think, is I just never really felt myself. I didn't feel like I had quite the same energy or was in quite as good a mood as I otherwise would have been or had been before in summer when I wasn't expecting. So the second big thing was the fact that I was only able to play volleyball once a week. So as I said earlier, I was training with the local National League team in Norwich. I played with as a teenager. This was really good fun, playing with my old friends again. But the problem was only training once a week compared to, I knew the guys in Uppsala were training 4 or 5 times a week, having pre-season friendlies. I very much felt like I wasn't just not getting better like they would be. I was probably getting worse because I'm getting rusty. I'm not getting the touches that I need at the level that I need in order to get better. So I very stupidly then piled enormous pressure onto this 1-2 hour training session that I had once a week that, it was not my training session. I'm not in the team, I'm a guest there. So I'm not getting the reps that maybe I would have done. And then I'd go in, I need to do this, I need to work on that, I need to do all this. Inevitably wouldn't do all those things because I've set my expectations unreasonably high. Would be really disappointed and grumpy and then feel miserable afterwards when I was supposed to be amazing because I finally played some volleyball, and then have a whole week to stupidly do the same thing all over again, but even more so because I need to make up for last week that wasn't good enough, go through it all again, So yeah, I had volleyball once a week, which isn't ideal, but then I definitely dealt with it badly and had a much worse time than I otherwise would have done. So the last thing, which was probably actually the biggest thing for me, contributing to this feeling of being a bit down and lethargic all the time, was the underlying feeling I had that I was never going to get to go, that this would fall through, and I wouldn't get to play. And I think this basically comes about from the fact that I've struggled quite a lot and still do to a lesser extent with imposter syndrome, this feeling like I don't belong here, people are going to work out I'm not good enough, I shouldn't be playing at this level. It's generally gotten worse the higher the level I've played at. And this now being the highest level that I would have played at, this feeling was quite strong that, I don't belong here, like people are going to work out, like, what's this guy doing here? He's rubbish. And so I had this underlying feeling that, well, of course my visa is not going to go through because it was never meant to, because I'm never meant to play at this level. Some of the positives though, I was really grateful to go through all of this with Meg, much as it was a shame that she was feeling similar to me. It was one of the reassuring things that I wasn't going, quite frankly, mad, because we could relate to each other going, yeah, it is just a bit weird. It's quite hard to explain. This feeling of not knowing if you're coming or going is just strangely draining. So that was reassuring, although obviously it would have been nice for Meg to be fine for her own sake. Now, I don't mean to come across like this is some big sob story and I had an awful summer. Like I didn't. As I say, it was nice. I had a good time. Big picture, it's fine. I look back on it with fond memories. But as I said earlier, I'm really keen to share that this is one of the downsides, at least, of trying to play sport. I'm not the only one. I know I have a friend who plays pro now, and he's had similar-ish problems with visa. It was a slightly different scenario, but it was the same thing where plans just completely get derailed. You're not in the country you think you're going to be in, playing the sport you think you're going to be doing. You're sort of sat at home twiddling your thumbs. This is an unfortunate reality, I think, especially being British, of trying to play sport in Europe. But generally, this is part of sport. I think there's loads of uncertainty. It's quite a volatile thing to do. You don't have this safety that, I can just stay, put my feet under the table, get nice and comfy here. I mean, maybe you can if you're good enough at the right club, but certainly for me, that doesn't look like a reality at this moment in time. So again, I really want to be honest about the things that are difficult, and maybe they're not difficult for everyone, and I'm just making a big fuss over nothing. But then I'm being honest about my experience, because this is my channel, and it's about me and how I'm finding playing volleyball. I definitely learned some lessons though of things that I could do differently next time. I think there's three big things. One is to not beat myself up about feeling a bit rubbish. It's okay to not be okay. I remember one time trying to sneak 9 holes of golf in after my friend had finished work, and we were sort of talking about our days, and he says, I had a busy day at work and so on. I'm saying, I went to the gym, and then I watched some volleyball, and then I went for a walk with Meg, and had coffee with a friend, and here I am. And yet he's in a great mood and I feel rubbish, and I beat myself up like that. And that's really unhelpful and not a good idea. So I would definitely try to be more accepting about, this is a tough situation. It's okay if I don't feel my best. You don't need to beat yourself up about it. So the second thing, which I did do fairly well, but I mean, you can always do better, is to try and keep busy, especially with things that are relevant to your goals. So for me, that was stuff like going to the gym, making the most out of my volleyball sessions. But yeah, keeping busy was really helpful, and doing more of it will be good, because it's when you're sat around ruminating, at least this was my experience, that I would have negative thoughts and get in my head and get a bit down. The third thing then would be to not take things going according to plan for granted, which I definitely did. I just assumed everything would work perfectly, because why wouldn't it? And in reality, there's loads of reasons why I wouldn't, and it didn't. So clearly that was the case. I've never tried to live in another country before, and yet I just assumed, everything will go fine. And I think if you go into it with at least some expectation that it could go wrong, then it stops you having this sense of entitlement for stuff going according to plan, which means if it doesn't, it's much easier to deal with. Anyway, eventually the visa did turn up. Hooray! It was early October, and basically as soon as we got the email, we had to rush to the embassy to sort some more logistical stuff out. That was no problem. Book our flights, and then we headed straight over to Sweden just in time for Uppsala's first home game of the season, and then for my first game playing in Europe.